Alexa Donne here, and today I am going to be talking about how I got my agent. Again! So I made this video when I first started my channel way back in 2017, but A, it's old and I'm awkward, and I realized B, a lot of people haven't heard this story because I made that video so long ago and it hasn't come up again, and I am coming up on the 5-year anniversary of being with my wonderful, lovely literary agent whom I adore, Elana Roth Parker. And I also realized that I say that all the time, that I love and adore and appreciate my agent, and I don't always actually tell you why. All of the ways in which we have been a really good fit, the things she's done that have made me go all heart eyes, that strengthened and deepened our relationship. Lots of questions come up about kind of developing a relationship with your agent, you know, being afraid to email your agent, communicating with your agent. So I thought I would use the first part of the video to rehash the stuff you know, the how I got my agent story, but then I can talk a little bit about our relationship over the last 5 years, the kind of moments that we had that deepened that relationship, kind of my own feelings. Yes, I was nervous about my agent at first, and that's very, very normal when you first get into a relationship with your agent, because it's like any relationship. You need to get to know each other, you have to go through things together, and hopefully you come out stronger on the other end. So, in brief, for me, it's still me, how I got my agent. So back all the way up to the ancient history of 2013, which is when I finished my first novel, my YA sci-fi novel. And I was fortunate enough to get an agent for that book. I won't go into all the nitty-gritty of that because that would be like 10 minutes. But long story short, finished book, revised book, was in a couple of different pitch contests, Pitch Madness and The Writer's Voice, got interest from The Writer's Voice, from agent, did several R&Rs for that agent, yes, several, that's a whole long thing, signed with that agent in the fall of 2013. We went on submission in the early spring, late winter of 2014. I was on submission for about 1.5 years for that book. We went out to about 30 editors over the course of 1.5 years. No one was interested in buying it, and I did shelve that book. Wrote another book. Book wasn't really the right fit for agent. We went through the whole process together. Like, I did a revision, we had some conversations, and then we amicably parted ways because we weren't on the same page about where I wanted to go with my career forward. And by the way, that's totally normal and natural. It happens to a lot of people. The first book we write doesn't always look like the second, the third, the fourth, etc. And I was seeing myself heading in a new direction. I did query that book, and other agents weren't interested in it, which is why I have such strong feelings when I talk to you about dead genres and unmarketable categories. I have gone through the process of writing a heart book that just doesn't work for the market, but I took it on the chin and I wrote my revenge novel. This is my revenge novel. I've also called it my F it book. You can insert the proper cursing as you wish, because I basically was feeling down in the dumps. I was feeling completely dejected, like I'd written the best book I would ever write. Spoiler alert, it wasn't true. That the next book you write is always going to be the best book you write, usually. And I was frustrated, and instead of giving up, I decided to take an idea that I had had for a couple years, I'd been nursing, that I didn't feel I was good enough to write, and I wrote it anyway. And this brings us to this book and how I got my current literary agent, Elana Roth Parker, the agent of my heart, aka the best possible business fit for me. We have a really good working relationship. Well, how did I get my agent the second time around? So I finished Brightly Burning in very early February of 2016, like wheels turning, remembering dates. And this is the part where I always have to disclaim, don't do as I did. Unless, everything's a case-by-case basis, and it's very important to know that I draft very clean, that I was on my 3rd book by that point, and I was also in a very raw emotional space, having parted ways with my previous agent, and at that point we were going on 7 to 8 months since that had happened. I had, as I mentioned, unsuccessfully queried that previous book, and this book felt like all my eggs in one basket. It felt like my shot to prove that the first agent wasn't a fluke, that I could write decent books and someone might want to rep me. Plus, as I have discussed in some videos, I saw a hole in the market. I saw a moment. I saw YA sci-fi, specifically YA space books, having a mini boom. And I knew that I could potentially get in the middle or the end of the buying trend. It ended up being the end of the buying trend for reasons which I will explain. I mean, the long story short is it took a while to sell on submission, but I had a fire under my butt. And I queried Brightly Burning within 2 weeks of finishing the first draft. But because of the way that I draft, this is important, because of the way that I zero draft, that included a full revision on it. Could I have done another revision? Yes, I didn't, so just don't do as I did. I queried. I had a pretty good querying experience. This was back in 2016. Things were faster. YA was still, it was saturating, but not saturated. So all in all, it took me like 8 to 10 weeks to end up with an agent, if I recall correctly. I started querying on February 9th, 2016. I got an offer on March 22nd, 2016 from an agent who I queried in mid-March, so it wasn't one of those early queries that turned into an offer. And then my eventual agent, Elana Roth Parker, she offered on March 28th, and then because of the decision window from the first agent, it was all kind of done and dusted the first week of April. It was around Easter time. I remember kind of setting my deadline because I had to account for Easter. I also remember where I was when I got the email from Elana that she wanted to have a call. I was at WonderCon, so that's always going to be a memory in my mind. I was in the vendor hall, I was looking at booths, and I got this email and I just walked around in a daze. It was a really nice day, a really nice moment. So she wanted to have a call. I had notified her of the offer from the other agent, and at that point I think Elana had it for 2 weeks and change. I had sent it to her approximately 2.5 weeks before. How did that happen? Bad at storytelling. I saw her manuscript wish list tweet, and I believe in the manuscript wish list because Elana was an agent that I knew of. Of course I knew of Elana. She had sold the Selection series, but my book was nothing like the Selection series. But I saw her tweet her manuscript wish list that she really liked high concept science fiction and fantasy, commercial hooks, and I knew she liked romance because Selection, and so I was like, I'll try it. It's always worth trying an agent who might possibly, as long as you don't know for sure they don't like or rep what you're writing, it's often worth shooting your shot. So that is what I did. I queried her and I put manuscript wish list in the subject line to indicate that I mean, in fairness, that's a very broad manuscript wish list point, but I felt I fit it. I guess she agreed. She requested the full. And when she emailed me, she was actually on a family vacation and she had been reading it on the train, and she emailed me like, I'm halfway through and I know I want to have a call with you. And so we set up the call for a few days later. It was definitely a weekday. I was at work. It's coming back to me. So it was probably that Monday or Tuesday. I got the email. I was at WonderCon, so it was Saturday probably, right? The time. And it was just a really good call. We talked for over an hour and we went right down to business. And this is where we kind of get into style and fit. Since I had already had an agent, I knew what I wanted. And I had been on the merry-go-round, once. I knew submission. I was able to talk to her. I was like, okay, these are the editors who read my previous book, who liked it. This is kind of what I like, what I have in mind. I was able to ask her questions about her editorial style, communication, very important to me. I had had an agent who was very good at communication and a good editorial agent. I knew I wanted the same things. I didn't part ways with my previous agent because I was unhappy with any of the businessy agency stuff. And I was able to see on the phone, we were a very good business fit. We got down to brass tacks. We talked about sublists. She was talking about imprints and editors, and I was like, yes. And she was mentioning comp titles, and I was like, yes. I could tell. I mean, this is also one of the reasons I queried her. She knew the market space. She was well read. She knew the imprints. She knew the editors, and she knew how to sell YA in an increasingly tough YA market. There were some things that were of consideration at the time that, funnily enough, changed soon after I signed with her, but just so you know, always the curiosity of the agent story. At the time that I queried her and she offered, she was at a boutique agency, meaning she had her own one-stop shop agency. So she was a one-woman show. She had her sub rates through New Leaf, so that was part of the conversation. She would be the literary agent, but sub rates would go through New Leaf, what the percentages were. We talked about those things. We talked about aspects of her agenting philosophy, which haven't changed. At the time, she had been on maternity leave. She took an extended maternity leave, having Kira and one picture book author as her primary clients that she carried over from her previous agency and career, and was rebuilding her list. So I was only the second client that she signed after rebuilding her list, so fourth client total, and I think now she's sitting at 19, 20, 5 years later. Elana keeps a very small list. She likes to keep a small list. She does a lot of personal contact and attention with her clients. And she just mentioned things that I liked the sound of, that I would never work with an assistant, very fast turnaround times for reading, very sharp communication, that she would communicate with me any way that I liked. She would run sub with me any way that I liked. That's something that we discussed. You know, I said I like to receive rejections. I like to know how things are going, so I like consistent updates. I'd rather kind of, you know, give me the rejections, rip off the band-aid. She was like, cool. She was just very straightforward. She knew her stuff. And I could tell that she just wasn't a person who pulled punches. She wasn't a person who pulled punches, but she wasn't by any means blunt or scary. She was a perfect medium for me. Bearing in mind, I am also kind of a getting down to brass tacks kind of person, so that was kind of a fit thing. And of course we discussed her editorial vision for the novel, and the two primary things that she mentioned, I was like, yep, I did that. I should fix that. And yep, I did that. I should fix that. Nothing I had any problems with. And I also liked, I asked her this not because it was anything I'd had issues with previously, but because of things I was aware of with other people. I asked her about revision timeline. Who decides when we go on sub, you or me? What does the sub timeline look like? Do you think we'll go on sub in the spring, in the fall? Really, it needed to be the fall because my schedule, which is a whole other thing, I was planning Harry Potter conference, so I knew that I couldn't realistically turn around edits to her for a couple of months, and we discussed all of that. We discussed the timeline and the business stuff, and I liked what she had to say, and so I signed with her in April of 2016. As I mentioned, it took a little while for me to edit the book because I needed more time, but we worked on those edits in July and August of that summer. And then we went on submission in September of 2016. Oh, so now we get into, I've done a whole video on my submission story, but we get into the relationship stuff. That's how I got my agent. So first off, starting with the early stuff, it's super normal when you first get into a relationship with your agent, even when you get along super well on the phone, even when you're feeling very confident in your choice, but imposter syndrome is gonna hit you really, really hard. It's like imposter syndrome, but it's also just kind of that nervousness when you're in a new relationship where you feel like you want to impress your agent, like you want your agent to be happy with you. You don't want to bother them too much or ask them stupid questions. That goes in quotes because there's rarely actually a stupid question. And so our relationship started off as kind of very like basically and professionally and tentatively as it normally does. I would write emails, like well, when she wasn't emailing me, my agent is very good at communication, but if there was something that I needed that I had questions about, I would think about, okay, what's my subject line? And then I would write out the emails and I would try to do bullet points because I knew I could be long-winded. And so we had kind of that tentative back and forth. We did talk on the phone a couple times, but primarily our communication was over email. Things I liked that were kind of those first tentative like bonding moments. My agent's great with submission, sharing the submission list with me, getting my feedback. I was able to ask questions about, okay, why this imprint? Ah, okay, this editor, oh, blah, 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 blah. I was suggested an editor and she explained to me why that particular editor just wasn't gonna work out at this time for this project. And her answer was so like smart and market savvy. That was like the first like trust moment of like turning up the dial. Like, of course I trusted her when I signed with her, but because I am such an extra person in terms of knowing the market, and I'd been on the merry-go-round and I'd been on sub, but that was a really pivotal moment for us of me going to myself, you can chill out. Your agent knows what she's doing. Make suggestions when you want to, ask questions when you want to, but like, she knows what she's doing, and it's been like that ever since. Honestly, I made 0 suggestions for our sub list for my thriller, I'm pretty sure, because I was like, my agent knows what she's doing. And you know, it's a trust building exercise. So submission is a really emotional experience, and it can be quite harrowing, especially when you don't sell. And so that was really the first kind of crisis point, like forged in fire point, that really brought Elana and I closer together. It was September to February, which was our first round of sub, and I went to acquisitions at a Big 5 publisher, and it was also one of those situations where we had to wait weeks. I think it was 3 weeks from editor interest to the acquisitions meeting and the decision. So it was kind of that extension of like hope, the hope that this could be it, I'm gonna sell the book, and then we got a no. And so we had to regroup and figure out what to do. We decided it was revising the book. We had semi-consistent feedback from a couple different editors that gave us a path forward on how we might revise the book to go on second round submission. And she wrote a phrase in an email that it was the moment. Like, there's like a moment when you fall in love with a person. This is when I professionally fell in love with my agent. And that is when she said that she was on a mission of vengeance to sell this book. And I was like, heart eyes. Not only that, but then we went onto a call, and this is when, like, we'd already worked editorially together to revise the book the first time for submission, and it was a good experience, but she was so magic on this call because I was feeling pretty bereft. I was up for a revision, but also she specifically said, we're gonna fix pacing in Act 1, and then we're gonna work on romantic tension. And I was like, yes, but help. I remember saying to her, I know this sounds ridiculous, but I literally need you to tell me what to do. And that is when she actually gave me one of the best editing tips, like revision tips I've ever received, and I've shared it on this channel because it was a game changer for me. And it's when she shared with me the pacing tip, the editing for pacing tip of, you're not cutting scenes, you're not cutting subplots, you're not cutting characters, you are doing a line level tightening. And she basically walked me through it, the whole, oh, how a reader's eyes moves over a page. You want to look for any clunky paragraphs that might stop them in their tracks, any natural stop points. If you're describing something in 3 sentences, you trim it down to 2. And that is how I cut a lot of words from the first act, like 6,000 words, which is decently substantial. I think it was about 6,000 words, but that plus she helped me brainstorm ideas for romantic tension in Act 2 and a couple of other things we did. And she was there for me when I needed her, not only like emotionally, like she, you know, there was no like, oh, well, maybe it's not working because of this. It was like, no, we're gonna pull together. We're gonna make this happen. I believe in you. I love this book so much, and I believe in this book so much that I'm on a mission of vengeance, but also here, I am going to hold your hand to get the book where it needs to be. So that was a really critical point in our agent relationship. And then, in fairness, helped by the fact that it worked, that it paid off. We went on second round submission 3 weeks later because I did a 10-day revision. Also, what helped with our relationship here, she was always fast, but she knew she had the fire under her butt and I had the fire under my butt, and we were still in basically spring submission, which is a critical submission season. I revised in 10 days, she read it in 48 hours. We did a little back and forth on some like copy line stuff, and she got it back out the door at the beginning of March. And then from there, we got an offer 2 weeks later. We got a preempt offer 2 weeks later. And then the second critical point of me getting just massive heart eyes for my agent. And this is why I will go on at you guys about how it's not about enthusiasm. Enthusiasm's important. It's not even about kind of the warm fuzzies, though the warm fuzzies can be important. It is about, can they sell your book, and then what can they do with your book once they sell it? Negotiation, contract, offer stuff, like the actual advocacy part is very, very important. My agent was brilliant in terms of negotiating with the publisher. I won't go into super specifics except to say she got the advance way up from where it started. She walked back the rights they wanted world. She was like, they got English non-Commonwealth, which is also a baller move. That enabled us to do our own sub rights, foreign sub, in the UK market, where we eventually did sell. She was a champion. She walked back the rights while getting me more money. She's brilliant. And then she did the whole contract negotiation. She was so sharp about things like my option clause. The hard eyes are hard eyes. But it's when I really got to see like an agent doing their job, and I just saw the warm fuzzies. So those were just the whole process of selling the first book, that brought us together. The next thing that was really important, and this speaks to me and fit, is Elana, and this is something that she said on the call actually that I forgot that really meant a lot to me. She said, your relationship with your editor is your own. That her job was to find me an editor who not only wanted to buy my book, but who she thought I would work well with, and then she would want me to work well with that agent and work independently with that agent. She is always there for me, but she has given me the choice of when do I copy her on emails, when do I bring her in on phone calls, so that I'm able to actually have my own relationship with my editors. And I really appreciate that. That really vibes with my style, and not all agents have that working style. That's why it's very important to ask them about things like that. Will you require me to copy you on every single email to my publisher, anyone at my publisher, is a good question. You might actually want that, in fact. Different strokes for different folks. And that's the thing, over the next period, the next while, she was there for me when I needed. She let me take the lead when I wanted. I kind of went through the process. My editor left my publisher within months of buying my book, and my agent was the one who called me and talked me through that and reassured me, so she was there for me for that. My agent was there for me when book 2 was hard, when I was assigned a new editor and given a deadline that was really overwhelming that I knew I couldn't hit. She was the first one there, and she was like, it's not a problem, we're gonna get you a different deadline, and she did. She was there for me even though she was on maternity leave when I was tight to that deadline and convinced my book was garbage. Now, I was covered during her maternity leave by the head of the agency. I skipped that part. My agent went from boutique to joining Laura Dale Literary a couple months into our relationship, so this was even before we went on sub. Very bad at storytelling, me. This is why I write it down. You can revise when you put things out of order when you write things. So at this point we're with Laura Dale Literary. And so Laura covered me when my agent was on maternity leave, and Laura was amazing. That was a moment that gave me a lot of faith in the agency. I, to that point, hadn't really interacted with the agency. The head of the agency read my book in less than 48 hours and gave me critical feedback on it that gave me the confidence I needed to finish and hit my deadline. I love my agency. And then my agent was still copying on all this stuff. She was on maternity leave at the time, but she was back for any essential needs because my book was releasing at that point, around that time, very fast. Now, it's not always required, of course, that your agent come back from mat leave early. It was hardly something that we were demanding of her, but what was important is that she set up someone to take care of me and all of her other clients while she was on maternity leave, and I have heard stories where agents don't do that for their clients, where their clients are left high and dry for up to 6 months. That is nightmare fuel, and my agent is just, she's professional. She takes care of us. I heart eyes her so hard. Which brings us to the next critical point where we became stronger than ever. And I don't even remember when it was, somewhere in that period probably. I feel like it was after this. And it actually came about because of another client. Elana meets her clients where they want to be met, including on communication. I had been just like an aggressive emailer up to that point. I was like, yeah, I email my agent. She answers me real fast. It's great. I love email. Another client said in our group chat, our agency group chat that I started, that she was texting with Elana, and I had this moment of like, do I want to text my agent? Can I text my agent? And I asked her, she's like, of course, if you want to text with me, like if that's what works for you, we'll text. And now I text my agent. And it was really critical to evolve our relationship. And bearing in mind, we'd already been through some stuff, so we'd gotten closer. Closer in the sense that I understood her personality, felt she kind of understood mine, and so we could be more casual with each other about like book feelings and all sorts of stuff, publishing feelings. And then texting took that to the next level, because I no longer had the pressure of like shooting off a quick question to her, but feeling like I needed to give it like a formal subject line. Oh, and it would be silly to email her for one silly thing, so I should probably put a couple other questions in there. No, texting's great because I could ask her the silly things that were kind of, sometimes it's the things that are pinging my anxiety, but sometimes it's literally just, oh, I saw this publishing thing. Do you have context for that? And she literally will explain publishing things to me. She's really lovely and very patient, but it brought us closer, because now it's like, hey, did you see that thing? Or hey, FYI, I'm doing this. And it's been great. And from there, we also Twitter DM with each other. So I basically have technically 4 different communication channels with my agent, and I use all of them because she's also really great on the phone. I'm not usually a phone person, but ever since that call we had to do the revision to Sell Brightly Burning, I realize the value of my agent is very good on brainstorming calls. And so now every single time I get an edit letter from my editor, the first person I actually have a conversation with after like 24 to 48 hours I get to digest is my agent. My agent is the one, we go over the letter I received because she's read the books as well, and we talk it through. She did it for me on The Stars We Steal. That by that point, that's when she was like tentatively coming back from maternity leave. Very super helpful in helping me get through that. You know, those revisions were a lot, and she was very helpful there. We did it on the Ivies. We'll probably do it on Murder, She Texted. It's kind of like you establish kind of the patterns with your agent, whatever works for you and works for them. And so yeah, we mostly text, but sometimes we Twitter DM. I email her for more formal stuff. I email her, I copy her on, I do on the majority of my emails to my publisher. I don't always. It's kind of smart to do it like I'd say 80 to 90% of the time, but then you get to have like a 10%, like if you send your editor like a silly funny email that your agent doesn't have to be copied on and that kind of thing. And then we do our brainstorming phone calls. And so another thing that was just like, it's forged in fire. It truly is. And I hope what this does is maybe give you some expectations, some ideas of how your relationship with your agent should be. It doesn't have to be exactly like mine, but I'll tell you the things that have really made a difference. But I hope in sharing this, it kind of gives you an idea of like, oh, my agent should be doing that. Because the next thing where my agent was just a rock star, forged in fire, when you're not a breakout, when your sales are not astronomically high, asterisk, my sales are good for YA sci-fi, just want to bear that in mind. But I didn't become a breakout darling of YA. I'm not selling tons of copies. And generally there's always going to be a huge letdown after you debut unless you become a breakout star, and most people simply don't. And what has been very important is my agent has always been candid. She'll look up my book scan numbers for me when I ask, and then importantly, she'll talk to me about them contextually. She will look up comp titles and we'll talk about, okay, and that's why I have a sense of, I actually have sold pretty well for a YA sci-fi, but oh, those are the normal numbers for a YA fantasy. Mind blown. A ton of the information that I get to share with you on this channel is because of frank, honest conversations I've had with my agent. She's just super transparent with me. We shop talk about the industry because I enjoy that and she doesn't mind indulging me. But she supported me. She's always been explicit and she doesn't gaslight me, which is very, very important. And I cannot say that of all agents who have relationships with their clients, because I have friends who have felt very gaslit by their agents who, when the sales weren't maybe as good as everyone wanted them to be, said things like, well, maybe if you were on social media more, those sorts of gaslighty comments. But no, my agent is coming in with the realness, and we talk about how it's, you know, great to have a platform. And I've obviously worked hard on things like YouTube, but ultimately it is up to the publisher to push the book. And even when the publisher pushes the book, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but it's not the author's fault when you don't blow up or sell a ton. And my agent has always been there supporting me. She builds me up. and she makes sure that I don't feel like shit. If I'm down on myself, she gives me pep talks. If I'm having an anxiety spiral, she tells me to calm down, but not in a minimizing or gaslighty way. She says in a very nice way, like, it's okay. It's going to be okay. She basically tells me the practical things that I need to hear when I'm having an anxiety spiral. Very helpful for me. And so that has been really essential for me. My agent builds me up instead of tearing me down. There are ways to speak pragmatically and frankly about publishing and numbers and all that kind of stuff without making your client feel like garbage, which is often what publishers how they make us feel, but I know agents who do that as well. The next thing where I just adore my agent to the end of the earth that has been very important for me, and this is gonna vary agent to agent, but find yourself an agent who is like my agent if you can. My agent likes my writing. She likes my writing style, which at first I was like, really? Imposter syndrome. I was like, you like my writing style? That's the thing. It's important to find an agent who doesn't just love that one book, who doesn't just think I can sell that one book, but to find an agent, it's not simply who is in for the long haul, because I think every agent says that they're in for the long haul, that they're a career agent, unless they're really frank and say that they're not, but who is able to be flexible with what you write. It isn't just they need that one type of idea, that one type of book to be happy, but they like your writing style, the way that you execute tropes, character-driven writing, whatever that kind of special sauce is about your writing. They like it so that they are able to roll with the punches and go with you on the various modes of your career. And what has been such a relief with my agent and has brought us closer together is how flexible she is with what I write. She's like this with all of her clients. She signs people who generally she vibes on the writing, so it doesn't matter if they write different kinds of things. She's always gonna find something that she loves about that book so that she can be a very good advocate for it. Whereas I know people whose agents shoot them down. They say, I don't like that idea, you can't write it. I don't like this book, I'm not gonna sub it. That kind of stuff. And just the emotional security. This is like having, you know, really emotionally stable parents as well. I have this emotional security and this safety net with my agent of knowing she's never gonna neg me. She's never gonna say this is garbage and you shouldn't write it. If she does have a problem with something that I write, if I'm off on something, I know she'll say it to me, but in a very thoughtful, pragmatic way, and she would never say, don't write this. I don't like this, I can't sell this. She would come with solutions. How if there is, say, a marketability problem, how we might tackle that. And I have talked to her about like certain like niggling ideas in my mind, and she's been frank about market conditions, but has never said don't write it. It's always kind of a how we move forward conversation. And then she lets me take the lead. She never wants any of her clients to be unhappy, to aggressively write to market, to not write stories that they love. The best books in her eyes are ones that we want to write. And so when I decided I wanted to pivot to thriller, first of all, I apologized to her. I remember the day I sent her the text, because at that point she had signed a friend of mine on a referral who also writes thrillers, and I took a chance on that one. I said to her, I was like, I think you might like her high concept commercial sense and the writing is fantastic, but I know you don't like dark books, but... So that's how she ended up signing Dana Mella, who is a friend of mine, and I sent her a text and I was like, I'm so sorry, but I think I'm gonna become a thriller writer because Dana and I are critique partners and I had the idea for the Ivies. And I was like, LOL. And she was like, cool. She rolls with the punches. My agent had not previously represented thrillers. She still technically doesn't represent thrillers, like meaning they're not on her manuscript wish list, I'm pretty sure. She doesn't like dark books, so if you have like dark horror, that's really not for my agent. But she rolled with those punches. She basically said, yeah, I'll talk to Laura. We will come up with a sub list. I will reach out to editors. We'll sell your thriller. And she did, obviously. And that's the thing. She's really smart and savvy. She supports me completely with whatever I want to do. I plan to move into adult thrillers and she's gonna roll with those punches too. We've talked about it. And I love that about her. And I know she's like that with all of her clients. There are other clients who are also considering moving into adult, and she will rep those projects for those clients, even though she doesn't actively seek out and sign adult clients. And yeah, it's the emotional security. I feel emotionally secure with my agent, and that emotional security is tied to business security. We work well together. She's super transparent. She's flexible. She supports me when I need her to. I could go on literally forever, but that's kind of those are the things that really have brought us close together. She was also super supportive when my mom died. I mean, can you imagine if someone weren't super supportive when that happened? But regardless, it really meant a lot to me that she was there for me. Before that happened, like, we had all these plans to go on sub in that spring, and I was like, and she was like, no rush. My agent would never rush me on something like that. She's patient and thoughtful and caring and really good at her job. We've now sold more books. I mean, it carried on. She's good at working with publishers. They like working with her. She's good at negotiation. She's good at contracts. There was a sticking point on my contract for the Ivies, and she worked on it till it was fixed, and I love her. I just like how she's always there to support me and obviously nudge me along. We nudge along together, but I never feel pushed by her. I never feel pressured by her. It truly feels like an equal business partnership, which is to me the ideal agent-author relationship. Though it is going to vary person to person. Not everyone needs that. And I know she also adjusts herself for different clients. She has clients who aren't as like aggro about the market and stuff as I am. And so she kind of takes the lead for those clients. And it's great to find an agent who is flexible like that, who has, I'm certainly preferences, but they're preferences that they can mold and work to fit the client. An agent should always be willing to work with the client. And so that is my agent story, literally how I found her, but also all the ways that we have grown closer together. We're coming up on our 5-year anniversary, and I hope she's not sick of me. She doesn't seem to be sick of me. Bless her for putting up with me. And yeah, so now you know, every time I just go all gushy about my agent, those are some of the reasons why. I feel so lucky, and something that is important to just claim as we finish, and I say it sometimes, but this is why I mean that. You can only make so much of a guess before you actually sign and work with an agent of what they are actually going to be like to work with. And that's part of what makes querying hard. There's only so much research you can do because there's only so much that can possibly be out there in the universe to tell you what an agent is like. But also an agent, every relationship is different. And so an agent, you have to work with them to see what they're like with you and for you. And I just feel so lucky that I saw a manuscript wish list tweet where I was like, I write high concept. Let's try this agent. I know she's good at selling books. And that she would be such an ideal business fit for me. I could have never predicted that. And even on the call, as well as the call went, I could never have predicted how good a fit we would be until we actually went through various different business scenarios together. So yeah, like, take a little pressure off yourself to like find the perfect agent. And it's very normal to land with an agent and not find the right fit. So don't beat yourself up if you need to have a couple different agents until you find the right one. But yeah, that's me. Let me know down below in the comments if you have any questions, and give this video a thumbs up if you like it. I will make more kind of publishing experience type videos. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that. I post new videos 2 to 3 times a week. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and happy writing.